Hi, everyone. Welcome to Daily Relations. So we are kicking off a new book that we're studying. We finished up Ruth last week, and now we're headed on to Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, we're going to talk about timeline tomorrow, but today we're just going to talk about where it starts. And it's in the city of Susa, which you may have heard of if you read the book of Esther. We're going to get into that later. But Susa is right there. Now, let's get our bearings to what right there means. So right there is, in this map, an older map, this is considered Media. This is the Assyrians, and over here is Jerusalem, and the city and the sea. So the Mediterranean Sea. If we take a look at where that is now, I love this map, but it's reflecting a bit. So as you can see, this is the Arabian Desert and Saudi Arabia. This is Iraq. This is Iran. So right on the border between Iraq and Iran is where Susa was. And Susa was part of many capitals. So if we look back onto these, this just has an overlay of today's map, but going back, it's really interesting. We're going to talk more when we talk about the timeline, but it's interesting to see that Susa was part of this kingdom here during the Assyrian Empire. It was part of the Babylonian Empire, covered in green, and then as the Medes and the Persians took over, it was part of their conquered lands as well. So and during this whole time was a time when the Israelites had been taken out of their land. So like I said, we're going to talk more about timeline tomorrow, but it's interesting that this city stays strong through all these empires. And just the distance that it has all the way over here across the Arabian Desert. So trade routes would definitely follow along these rivers, go up and around. And also it's interesting to note, I can't remember which map it was on, it's probably on all of them, but if you know anything about Abraham, Father Abraham, beginning Genesis, well, let's talk a little bit about Genesis. So oftentimes people point to where the Garden of Eden was somewhere between these rivers, because it talks about these meeting up of rivers. Nobody knows exactly where the Garden of Eden was, but take that with a grain of salt. But the land of Ur right here is where Abraham came from. And he traveled to a distant land over here, this promised land that God promised to give to his people in the Old Testament. So, so that kind of gives you a little bearing as to how this land here relates to this land here, and how God had used this path and these people and this trade route for a long time throughout the Old Testament. So when we read it, it's good to understand that there is quite of a distance here, and you had to go around. You could not go straight across because there was nothing. It's just desert. So anyways, I hope that helps you with your study in Nehemiah, especially as we are kind of going to see the traveling happen and him going back to, I'm not going to give too much away, but to Jerusalem. So good luck. Have fun with your study today. You're going to read about and mark Nehemiah and just learn a little bit about him and his character and just what God does to his heart. And I hope that really touches you today. So anyways, thanks for joining me on Daily Revelations. I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye, everybody.